Well, hello. Today is January the 31st, Friday, and as always, here we are discussing the legislative process. So, a few things happened that were very important up on the Hill today, and we're going to try to make this particular conversation or show all about one thing that happened, and it had to do with a particular bill called HB 67. It was actually its first substitute that went through today. That is sponsored by Kurt Bramble. Now, this bill deals with the topic of abortion. I've got the links in the show notes down below. And this particular bill, again, brought up by a Republican. Here in Utah, you would say most of us as Republicans, and most of us, our values here in Utah are that we value life and that we are opposed to abortion. So this particular bill is all about fetal remains. And the premise behind this bill is that as the pro-life community would look at it anyways, is if we can humanize the human or the fetal remains, that will give us one more step on the ladder to making abortion illegal. A couple things about this bill that are very important are lines 55, 56, 57, and 59. So, though I hate to read them, let me take a moment just to read to you exactly what those lines say. They say, dead fetus means a product of human conception other than those circumstances described in subsection 767-31, 301, A, of 20 weeks gestation or more, calculated from the date the last normal menstruation period began to the date of delivery and that was not born alive. So did you catch that again? Line 57 of 20 weeks. So those that would really, clap and jump up and down and say, wow, this is a great bill. Let's get behind this bill. Is it really so great? Number one, abortions, for a lot of the reasons why young individuals or any female would seek an abortion typically do not occur after 20 weeks. And that's what this bill is doing. The majority of abortions occur right around week 8 to 11. What this bill doesn't do is it doesn't stop abortion. It doesn't solve for really anything other than maybe about 3 to 4% of those abortions. And it doesn't even make those abortions illegal. It does nothing. Yet it is being touted as this abortion bill. In fact, Kurt Bramble had the opportunity at the March for Life. He was invited up by Pro-Life Utah and many others to speak about this bill and to give his enthusiastic endorsement for being pro-life. Personally, I don't feel like this is much of a pro-life bill. You can read the bill and you can try to help me to understand how that is. Again, I'd appreciate your comments down below. So getting in the abortion debate, I've also placed a link to a video that I actually produced and sponsored with a Dr. Kathy Altman. So back in about 2015 is when I got brought into this debate and joined up with Pro-Life Utah, mostly because I didn't know that abortions were even happening in the state of Utah. As we went through that, it became evident that the Pro-Life Utah has a ton of amazing people in it. They needed some funding, and I had an opportunity to assist them with that and continue to be a large donor for that organization. I've got the link to the Kathy Altman video below, and I really hope that you would watch that. Very, very touching story. Anyways, back to the crux of the issue. What to do about abortion? Most of us hear it and we think, man, that's one that I just don't want to get into. That's a challenge and a discussion that is very difficult. Well, let me help you in this video with one simple thing that can change your perspective. And it's asking one question. And it, in my opinion, is the only question that matters. And to get to the question, we're going to start with a small story. Let's imagine that you as a parent or an individual are standing at your sink and your child or a young person comes up behind you, pulling on your pant leg and says, "Mommy, daddy, brother, sister, whoever, can I kill this?" Now, before you answer that question, what do you need to know? Well, you have to know, what is it? If it's a spider, probably stomp on it. If it's Your little brother who's just being disruptive? No, we don't do that. So similarly, the only question that matters in the abortion debate is, what is it? And unfortunately, most of the time, that question never gets brought up. It's always other things that get brought up in order to remove that one question that matters. So again, what is it? So here's an example. Let's say somebody says, well, we just don't know when life begins. Well, in my opinion, that person should be as pro-life as anybody out there. And here's a great example. Let's say that we're going to demolish a building and the alarms are going off and everybody's saying, all right, we're starting the countdown. We're going to blow up the building. We've checked it. We know no one is in there. We know 100% no one is in the building. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and all of a sudden the call goes out. We think someone's in the building. Can they still blow up the building? The answer to that question is no. They will stop the countdown. They will immediately go in and they will search. So here's the thing. If nobody knows when life begins, then logically, you should be the biggest pro-life advocate in the world. Because again, the premise is if we don't know if someone's in the building or not, we don't blow up the building. But here's the other thing, ladies and gentlemen. We know that it is at the moment of conception that life does begin. We know that that developing unborn is a unique entity, a unique human person. And just because of a variety of different issues that we'll go through here in a second that are typically brought up, yes, that is a person. So some people would say that we could kill this child even if the child is a human being. That just being human does not make you a person. That all humans aren't persons. And so our response to that again is to simply ask the question. And the question here is, what's the difference? What's the difference between a human and a person? And here's the interesting thing is that this question they must have an answer for. They have, again, divided humanity into two groups, one that is protected by law and one that we can kill with impunity. So they need to answer that question. So we know that this personhood is really just kind of a shell game. And what it kind of boils down to is what a lot of in this pro-life movement call as the SLED test. And you can remember that by the acronym SLED. So let's start with the first one, which is the S. And the S is size or physical appearance. And do humans lose their value when they don't look right? Because that's really what we're saying here, right? That at gestational age 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, it just doesn't look like a fully developed human. Well, neither does a newborn. A 6-year-old looks very different than a young adult. An adult looks very different than a late adult or a 60, 70, 80-year-old. So just because we don't look right, does that add to our value as humans? And the answer is, of course, no, it's not. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? You can look at it from this way. An acorn isn't an oak. But of course it is, right? And they say, whoa, no, it's not. An acorn is a seed. Well, then I would have to ask the question, well, what kind of a seed? An oak seed. So again, the acorn isn't an oak tree, but all this really shows that the infant isn't an adult and that the fetus is not an adult. That's all we're looking at there. The L in this is level of development. And so here what we're looking at is someone's value defined by his abilities, by what he can or cannot do. And again, do we forfeit our human rights as human beings, our claim to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because we don't have the capabilities others have? So what if a child can no longer play chess or run bases or read or even remember? A situation in my own family. My brother, who has his doctorate in genetics, was hit by a car. After that event, he was in a coma for a period of time and still has not regained all of his capacity. Does that mean because he was hooked up to life support for a period of time and that level of development was exactly the same as a fetus? You take my brother off of life support, he would have died. He was very dependent. Did that mean he suddenly lost his personhood? We have many people walking around that are on dialysis or some form of support for diabetes. Because their life is dependent upon an external source, does that mean that they're no longer human? Again, no way. So the E in the SLED test is environment. And here the question we want to ask is, do humans forfeit their worth when they change locations? What we're looking at here is, as a person moves from one place to another, I wake up here and I move to my office. Did I change as a person? Astronauts who fly to outer space, does that mean they change as a person? But even more important is in the circumstance of an unborn. Through that abortion process, typically the fetus is brought down the birth canal and is literally within inches, ladies and gentlemen, of coming into the world. But because that infant is still inside the mother, an abortion is legal and can be killed with impunity. So again, what we're looking at here is is changing locations morally trivial? And clearly, one environment cannot be the deciding factor as it relates to a human's value. Again, environment has nothing to do, no bearing at all on who you are. The last one in the SLED test is the D, which is degree of dependency. So here, again, we're going to ask a question. That question is human value determined by one's degree of dependency on others? This one brings up the most favorite word in the pro-choice movement, which is the V word, viable. Okay, the fetus isn't viable. It can't survive on its own outside of the womb. So the unborn's dependency on her mother for biological sustenance is irrelevant to the baby's value. And we kind of talked about that already with my brother who was on life support, those that are on dialysis. The list goes on and on. But again, babies of all ages are dependent upon their mothers for feeding, whether via blood, via the umbilical cord, breast, or bottle. And so in this sense, no child is viable. In fact, we probably have a lot of parents watching this who would say, I don't know if my 6-year-old, my 12-year-old, my 16-year-old is even viable. And so those are some of the things we want to look at. So again, a key takeaway here is if dependency determines worth, then no moral principle protects the weak and vulnerable from the strong and powerful. So again, let's look at this one more time. So we had the SLED test. S, size and physical appearance are irrelevant to significance. L, level of development has nothing to do with value. E, environment. Where you are has no bearing on who you are. And then the D, dependency does not determine worth. Memorize those things, ladies and gentlemen. But as we have some other legislation coming up, we have one that's not yet numbered. My representative, actually, Stephen Christiansen, is running one on abortion revisions. And this one is going to be patterning Kentucky bill, HB 2. And HB 2 came out and said that before a person can receive an abortion, they must audibly hear the ultrasound, or the heartbeat, pardon me, and an ultrasound must be performed, and the person must have the images described to them. Again, the hope here would be that we can humanize the fetus, the unborn, and that the person, upon hearing the heartbeat, seeing the images, would say, no way, I'm out of here. But now that we know what really is pro-life and what is pro-choice, do any of these bills really fit the mix? So again, some great things for us to all be aware of. If you like this type of video and you'd like me to focus more on specific bills, specific trainings, specific ideas, please let me know in the comments below. And again, quite a few links there. Have yourself a great weekend, and we will see you bright and early on Monday back up at the state capitol. Thank you.